If you've ever tried to grow watermelon in a small space and ended up with a tangled mess of vines and a lot of leaves and no fruit, in my experience, chances are you've either chosen the wrong variety, skipped feeding altogether, or allowed your vines to sprawl without any direction. Now, this method is different. I'm showing you how to grow watermelon in raised beds and containers vertically to save space, and exactly what I add to the planting hole to set your watermelon vines up for success from the beginning, so you get lots of fruit and not just leaves. This could change how you grow watermelon forever in your small space. First off, let's start with the trellis. Whether you're growing in a raised bed or containers on your deck or patio, a trellis is key from the get-go, and you want to install your trellis before you plant. The reason why we're growing on a trellis is because we're growing up and not out. So imagine your vines growing up this trellis instead of sprawling all over your deck or your patio. What a difference. It keeps the vines off the ground, keeps them healthier, allows you to see the fruit in order to harvest it, and grows you a lot more melons this way. So we've installed this 7-foot arch trellis in our 4x8 raised bed. Now you can grow in a raised bed that's smaller. A 2x4 would work, but in that case, it's probably the only thing you'll be growing in your raised bed, with the exception of maybe a few small vegetables underneath. Now, you can also grow watermelon in containers. You need to choose the right variety for your containers. We'll cover that in just a moment. But because watermelon vines run deep, you want to have a container that's at least a 15-gallon. And these smart pots work great for that. But choose your trellis wisely for your containers. I'm using an A-frame trellis, which is a great DIY option. It's in my book on raised bed gardening if you want to check that out. It's simply some sturdy posts. It's got some galvanized wire mesh. Because it's drilled together at the top, it flexes here, so it's flexible for your space. I'm going to place it in my containers, again, before I plant, so that my plants have the support they need from the get-go. Now, what most gardeners do, and maybe you've made this mistake, is you install your trellis too late, after the vines are already sprawling, and that way it's already a mess in your garden. And you do want to make sure that your trellises are nice and deep in your containers or raised beds. That way they can support the heavy fruit. So remember, the trellis goes in first. Now that we have our trellises installed, it's time to prep the planting hole. What's different about this method is that I'm adding targeted nutrients that are just what the watermelon needs to thrive from the get-go. Now we're starting with a good foundation of the bumper crop soil builder. And I'm also going to add some targeted nutrition here, some of the Master's Nursery blood meal. Now this is very high in nitrogen, has a 13 in nitrogen, which is what the watermelon needs to really have that strong leafy growth. So we're putting about a teaspoon or so into my planting hole. You can just kind of eyeball it, follow the directions on the back of the packet. And we're also going to add a very small handful of the bumper crop organic granular fertilizer. Now these are both time-released fertilizers. So I'm just mixing this around in the planting hole. And I'm actually going to add it to the base of both sides of the trellis because we're going to be maximizing our space and planting at both sides here. For the containers, I filled them up with the bumper crop potting soil. We'll sprinkle in our nutrients here and we'll be good to go. A little note here about containers. The Fabricant Smart Pots is aerated, which is especially good for watermelon because they won't get root bound in an aerated container. They will actually root prune and grow bigger roots. And they have really good drainage. But what I did do, because it's here on my patio, is I put these handy dandy drainage trays underneath. And they are on rollers, so this way I can move it around to chase the sun, chase the shade, or just if I change my mind on where I want to put them. Oh, and I also raise them up on bricks so they have more airflow underneath. They also have these little drainage spouts that allow you to drain the water out. I'll put all the links in the video description. Why is this targeted nutrition so important? Because instead of guessing what your plant needs, you're setting them up with success from the beginning. Stronger vines, deeper root, and better fruit set. Next, you want to choose the right variety that fits the space that you have. Now, you're not just limited to small, compact varieties when you're growing in a small space, but you do need to consider the size of what you're growing in, such as a raised bed, versus a container, and the height of your trellis. So for this tall trellis here in a raised bed, because it is deeper, we're going to plant the Charleston Gray variety. Now this is a large variety of watermelon. It can get up to 20 to 30 pounds, and it has beautiful red flesh. It's nice and oblong shaped. And I've got the seedling here that's about 6 weeks old. And you can see here I actually have 2 seedlings, but we're going to go ahead and plant both. And then because we are limited on space here, I will thin it out, whichever one is the strongest seedling. We'll leave that one and snip the others. Now I know that's really hard to do, but trust me, it's going to really help you manage the space of your watermelon vine. And watermelon does need a lot of sun. So you want to choose a space that gets at least 8 hours of sun a day. Don't plant it outside until the temperatures are around 60 degrees at night and around 70 to 90 degrees during the day. That's when it's going to thrive the best. So we're going to plant this Charleston Gray at the base of my trellis here. But because I want to make sure that I have a really nice watermelon here in my small space, and for this one, we're going to choose the Jubilee watermelon from my melon seed collection. So if you do need seeds, head over to our website, check it out. Our seed collections are 25% off with the code THRIVE25 all month long. So I'm going to plant a couple of seeds here and then just press the seeds down into the soil, about a 1/4 inch or so, cover them up. And I'm going to put 2 more seeds in here right along my drip emitter line. We'll talk more about watering in just a moment. And I'm going to repeat this process with the other side because these are going to grow up and over the middle. Just imagine those beautiful watermelon hanging down here. Now we're repeating the same process with my 15-gallon smart pots, with one difference. I grow smaller, more compact varieties in containers than I grow in my raised beds. So in containers, I'm putting one of my absolute favorites. I've grown it for many years, the Sugar Baby. So rather than a 20-pound fruit, this one grows to 5 to 8 pounds, and it's perfect for a container. If you try to grow a 20 or 30-pound fruit in a container, it just doesn't have the space here that it needs for the roots to spread out or for it to be productive in a 15-gallon. Plant a smaller variety and you're definitely going to have more fruit this way. Now I am going to plant it kind of towards the front here so it gets the maximum sunlight possible so it's not shaded out. Even by this little post, that really will make quite a difference. I have some little seedlings planted there at the front. I'm going to pop in one of the seeds. The Sugar Babies are also in my melon seed collection, but if you want more veggies that are container friendly, you can grab one of my container garden seed collections, and there's a lot of container friendly garden varieties in that, including little Sugar Baby. So I'm going to put my seeds in here. Mac, you like that, don't you? I'll put my seeds in here right at the base of the trellis. Actually put in 3 seeds. And, Mac, are you okay? Actually put in 3 seeds. And again, very important that we're thinning these as we grow so they don't get overgrown and we have a mess of tangled vines. And I'll do the same thing in the second container. I'm really curious to know, has anyone had an aha moment and realized something they're doing wrong that they're going to change the next time they plant watermelon? Let me know. Now, next, you want to make sure that you're training your watermelon vines from the start. So what we're going to do with this is as soon as your vines start to kind of run or get longer and reach the trellis, we're going to train them to grow up from the start. We're not going to wait till it gets a tangled mess of vines. We're going to guide them up right when they start to get long enough to reach the trellis. So what I like to do for this is 2 different things. These tomato clips, if you saw our tomato video a few weeks ago, you know how much I love these. They clip right to the stem. Now these vines aren't quite long enough, but when they do reach here, I'm going to clip the stem right to the trellis. You can do it with one hand, just like that, and keep up with that about once a week or so as they start to grow. The other thing you can use, which is super handy, is this stretchy tie tape. I love to keep a roll of this in my pocket when I'm out in the garden because I can just break it off and then quickly tie my vines to my trellises. Now you might be wondering, how in the world am I going to support a 20-pound watermelon as it grows up a trellis? You need to have a sturdy sling for it. And a couple of my favorite things to use are this garden netting and tool. And I'll definitely be showing you how to do that as the watermelon grow. Now for the smaller Sugar Babies, you can use a lighter weight support like a ripped up piece of t-shirt or even a piece of pantyhose. And I'll also be showing you how to do that as the watermelon grow. Next, we're gonna water consistently and only when they need it. And here's how you tell. We're gonna check the soil, not go by some type of a schedule. So what I do is I check if the soil is moist or not by sticking my finger in the soil. If it's nice and cool and feels moist, which my soil does right now, it doesn't need watering. But if you pull a little bit of soil up, that feels kind of dry and hot, that means that your watermelon definitely need it. And here's why this is so important, because if you water too much and your soil gets soggy, your roots will get root rot. And that is by far one of the biggest enemies of watermelon. But consistency is also key. So in order for me to stay consistent, I installed the Mr. Landscaper drip irrigation system, put it on a timer, and definitely check out our video on how to install drip in raised beds for all the info on that. Now for containers, they're smaller, so they dry out a whole lot quicker than raised beds. So you want to definitely water your containers a lot more often and check them more often, especially during a heat wave. Now for these, I'm using the Mr. Landscaper container Mr. Pot Stake, and we'll be doing a video in the next couple of weeks on how to get this installed in your containers. And it puts out a gentle downward mist of spray to effectively water your containers. The last step here of growing watermelon in my small space is feeding. Now, first off here at planting time, I'm adding my Monterey fish and guano like I always do. But what is different about this method is we're feeding based on the stages of the plant growth, not on some type of a general fertilizer schedule. So we've got our Monterey fish and guano, which is high in nitrogen for the first early stages of growth. When the plant is first growing its leaves, we're going to water it once a week with this, really give it a nice soil drench. I'm watering the leaves as well because it does absorb very quickly here through the leaves. This is a water-soluble fertilizer, and these nutrients will help these little seedlings start growing immediately. The nutrients are immediately available to the plant. Once my plants start to flower, I'm going to switch fertilizers on you guys. And we'll come back and do another video on that. But what we'll be switching to is a fertilizer that's higher in phosphorus, which helps your plant at that point start to bloom and have really good fruit production. So if you've never done it on this type of a growth schedule, you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how many more watermelon fruits you're going to get from this. And the reason why this is so important is because watermelon are heavy feeders, which means that they take a lot of nutrients out of the soil because they need a lot of food in order to produce those big, heavy melons that we're growing. I have a feeling that this method of growing watermelon was different for a lot of you. It's going to completely change how you grow in containers. If this is you, hit that like button. It really does help us out. And subscribe because there's definitely going to be more to come. Thanks for watching. See you next time in the garden.